Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GCP Podcast Under the Gulmohar Tree. Just as the Gulmohar Tree symbolizes growth and resilience, Under the Gulmohar Tree brings operators, investors, and M&A professionals together to share insights on scaling mid-market businesses. Through candid conversations, we explore leadership, innovation, and value creation, uncovering lessons and strategies to help you grow and thrive. Hi, Pratik. Welcome to the GCP podcast Under the Gulmohar Tree. Thank you so much for taking out the time. For our audience, Pratik is a managing director at William Blair, and he covers software and cybersecurity sectors. Pratik, welcome to the podcast. Can you please give a brief introduction to our audience? How did you end up here? What was your path into investment banking, etc.?
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity and glad to be here. A quick intro on me. So as you said, I'm a managing director at William Blair. I cover cybersecurity. I've been doing software investment banking for the last 15 years now. I started off my career at Barclays, and then I spent some time at Bank of America, and then I'm here now at William Blair. So I have a pretty vast experience within the software space. I've been covering cybersecurity specifically for the last 6 or 7 years now as the industry came into its maturity and sort of started finding its own segment outside of software, but still within that big bubble. Before that, I was in business school, and before business school, I used to be a business analyst. So I worked on the sales and trading desk at Bank of America from 2008 to 2011. Super interesting times, obviously the global financial crisis, et cetera. So lots of experience rolling in from there as well. So I've had a pretty long career in financial services, and banking for 15 years.
Thank you so much, Pratik. Always fun to talk to Bank of America alums.
Yeah, wonderful, always.
Yeah. So, switching gears slightly, within cybersecurity, it's becoming very interesting these days with AI and quantum computing, etc. Cybersecurity has become a critical concern for businesses globally. What do you think are the major trends shaping the industry today?
I think there's a couple of things you look at it, right? You first you look at it from a company perspective, right? You can think about the attack surface that the company has. So the number of places that it can get attacked is expanded significantly. 15, 20 years ago, we all sat within a firewall, we all had our own little network, we never extended outside. But now with cloud and then remote work and then so many multiple devices, you only worked on a computer before. Now you have we just had this thing. We had your iPad, your phone, your laptop, your watch, everything. Everything is connected to a network, right? So I think that network complexity has increased quite a bit. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is if you think about the attackers, right? That the number of ways that you can get attacked across the attack surface has increased exponentially. The frequency of attacks has increased exponentially. You also have nation states that now play an attacking role on different companies, so you have that as well. And then to add to that, in the last couple of years, you've seen, and you mentioned it, you've seen the evolution of AI. And you used to be able to say, okay, this person seems like a phishing scam, English isn't right, but now all that is gone, right? I mean, you can write perfect English with ChatGPT. So I think I look at it two vectors. The number of ways you can get attacked has increased, and the number of places that you can get attacked has increased. So, for CISOs, the challenge is always, look, you have to be right 100% of the time. The attackers have to be right once. So it's obviously become a critical issue. It's a challenging issue. Obviously, there's a reason the cybersecurity market is, it's a plus $100 billion plus market at this point. So, and I think it's only going to go up.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Now, as you mentioned, the cybersecurity threats are becoming more sophisticated. What technologies or approaches are emerging as game changers in identifying these threats and neutralizing these threats and helping resolve these issues on an ongoing basis?
That's a good question. So look, I think we're constantly evolving with the increase in attack surface. That's the thread you need to pull on. So network security has been around forever, right? Then we had, now we have cloud security because now we're in the cloud. But I think what encompasses a lot of this in our view is from a CISO's perspective again, right? It's you can buy a lot of different tools, but from a CISO's perspective, the ability to have visibility across your entire security stack, across your entire IT stack rather, right? Is becoming super critical. So there's a lot of vendors that are trying to figure out and say, hey, can I give the CISO a single pane of glass to look at all of his or her security apparatus and say, hey, I have found these 6 or 7 different threats. This is how these threats correlate. And this is what you should be doing as part of remediation, right? No longer is it enough to say, hey, you have an alert from here. Okay, you have an identity alert. Great. You have a network alert. Great. But are these related? Are they linked? Are they the same thing? Can I go resolve them? What's the remediation factor? It's becoming more critical. So I think this is the zenith. We haven't reached it there, but at some point, you invest X millions of dollars into a security stack, you need to have a single pane of glass. Visibility is the word that a lot of vendors are approaching towards, whether it's cloud, whether it's network, whether it's in your SOC, whatever it may be, right? That's what I would really hone in on.
Yeah, you raise a very important point, Pratik. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is companies will prefer a platform as opposed to a point solution. Is that right?
I mean, it's a debate that, it's raged over ages, right? Like I've gone through 15 years of this, and back in the day, when I say back in the day, this was 10, 12 years ago, you had two big players. You had Symantec and McAfee. Everyone just bought everything from them, yeah, right? And at least on the
Yep.
enterprise level. And on the personal level too. I'm sure at some point you had Norton, you had McAfee Protection, whatever. Those are two companies. And then there were other companies like Cisco doing networking, the tangential companies. What you saw over the last 15 years is an evolution of all these different point solutions that I've come across. And some point solutions have become huge companies like Endpoint, right? Think about CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike, Palo Alto was a network security company, and look at where it is today. So I think there's been a steady evolution of that, and there's been consolidation too. So you've gone from one end of the pendulum where you said, I'm going to have only, I'm going to have one, two, let's say Symantec, McAfee, to the other end where you say I'm going to have best of breed. And I think we're somewhere in the middle, right? And the reason I say we're somewhere in the middle because a lot of the technologies that come out today, they're all interconnected, right? They all have either API links that they pull from each other to give people single point of, like I said, a single pane of glass. So I don't think there's a world in which there's going to be only one CrowdStrike, only one Palo Alto. I think companies use multiple resources, and sometimes they consolidate some portion of their stack. If it's around like an endpoint, maybe you have like a few other things around that. Maybe it's networking, a few other things around that. But I find it very hard to believe you're going to have one company, at least at the enterprise level, covering everything. I know it's not the exact answer you're looking for, but it depends, right? What the security level is that they're looking
Fair
for.
point.
And to elaborate on that, the one thing I will say is, if you look at Microsoft, right? Good, great example of, they can play up and down the stack. They can play at the enterprise level with their E5 licenses. They can play at the mid-market level with the again, E3 and E5 licenses, depends. And that business has gone from 10 billion of security revenue in 2021 to 20 billion in 23. And if you just look at the endpoint, right, the market share has gone from 11% in endpoint to 26% just over that same 2 year period, 2021, 23. So what you're seeing is there's a explosion of security within the mid market, and mid market will prefer to have a single vendor because they probably have an IT director, they don't have a CISO, they don't have a 1,000-person security team, which an enterprise may have, right? So I think you're seeing that divide where enterprises can go best of breed and have a configured security stack, but I think the mid market is very much moving towards a consolidated stack, and it's still playing out, but that's what we're seeing in the space.
That's a great point, Pratik. So let's talk about consolidation for a second, right? So definitely organic theme is there, right? So companies are launching many different products and
Yeah.
have a platform now. But at the same time, there is a big consolidation push also happening in the cybersecurity space. Do you see this trend continuing, and are there opportunities for smaller players catering to the small medium businesses to thrive independently?
I think you're asking two separate questions, right? Your first question is, do I see consolidation? I think consolidation is driven by two factors. Consolidation is driven by one, a lot of VC money went into cybersecurity between 2019 to 2022, right? A lot of startups got funded with a lot of dollars flowing into them. I think we've reached a point where folks have figured out I don't need six of the same thing, right? Um, and maybe some of these technologies are really good for some of the larger companies to go buy them. A great example of that is in the data security space, right? If you look at the data security posture management companies, there's been about seven different acquisitions by CrowdStrike, by Palo Alto Networks. In all of these different events, what you've seen is these companies, the smaller companies got to about 1, 2, 3 million, and probably in the identity space as well. So ITDR is the other space. They got to 1, 2, 3 million, developed a good technology, but then weren't able to scale, and the big companies came and picked them up, right? So I think there's consolidation at that level. The second question was consolidation in the mid-market as customers. I think we've seen less of that because a lot of companies that have come out as solutions for the mid-market already have all these different modules. I don't want to say all, but a lot of different modules that a smaller enterprise might need, right? All the different touch points that cover your control points, your network, your email, your cloud, your identity. They already have solutions for that, so you probably don't need four different solutions for that. They already come with a bundled package. So I think there's vendor sort of ability to provide a full suite of solutions that a mid-market customer might need. But I think your first question was more around the M&A piece. We've seen a lot of M&A, and I think we'll continue to see that M&A because there's been a point where these companies get to 5, 10 million, and then it's very expensive to scale, right? You need to hit profitability. We no longer live in a zero interest environment where money is free, so there's pressure, to sell these companies or do something with them. So that's the way I would answer that question.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, let's look at the same issue from a different standpoint. So, there have been many high profile cyber attacks, right? How have these attacks influenced investment patterns in the industry? VC, private equity, however you want to categorize it, or strategic?
Yeah, you know, Sumit, well, the one thing I will say is the industry is very reactive, as you correctly pointed out. Something happens, everyone puts their hands up and saying, "Oh no, we need this," right? And you see that in consolidation as well, where it's like, hey, identity security is getting pretty relevant. We have some plays where you don't have a lot of plays. Maybe it's time to go out and buy a smaller company and do that. I think it's less driven by the kind of attacks, but I think the consolidation is more driven by what I said earlier, right? What are some of the white spaces that as a large security consolidator I do not cover, right? Maybe I have a CrowdStrike, good example. They bought this company called Adaptive Shield, right? Just a little while ago. They have using CrowdStrike example. They have a platform called Preempt, which is the identity security platform. They bought Adaptive Shield, which is a SaaS security platform, right? Which covers your security across all of your SaaS applications. But then the linchpin of that SaaS security is identity. How does an identity work across all these different SaaS applications? So then they went out and said, hey, we're missing the SaaS application piece. We have the identity, maybe combine them together to create an entire identity plus SaaS security stack, right? So I think consolidation is more driven by the adjacencies that you have within your existing portfolio and how you expand that. And sometimes it's driven by customer needs, right? A customer might come in and say, hey, I'm using XYZ and I'm using CrowdStrike or Cisco or Sentinel One or Zscaler or whatever it might be. I think if you have this and this combined, maybe it'll help me, then I don't have to buy two tools. So there's a lot of different motivations, and I think what your point around like, how the attacks are changing, I think that goes back to the first thing we talked about, which is how is AI affecting all of this, right? I don't think all the security companies are working around that. There is no specific solution that's out there to say like how you're going to defend against these AI attacks as they mature in sort of volume, velocity, and variety, right? But yeah, I think it's the market is evolving and it's constantly evolved, and we've come to so many different solutions because of, you know, again, because of adjacencies, because what else can I do to serve my customers? and less so this attack has happened. Now what do I do?
Got it. Let's dive deeper into that question for a minute. So, how are private equity firms approaching cybersecurity investments?
Yeah.
Do they have a different playbook compared to strategic acquirers?
Yeah, look, private equity, as you can imagine, is very of profit driven, right? When I say profit driven, I mean EBITDA driven. They need to see profitability in a company in order to make these investments. So security has been a fairly challenging aspect, especially when the companies are smaller. You obviously have PE firms like Thoma Bravo that have a big security portfolio within identity, with they just bought Darktrace, et cetera. And these are big public companies that they've been able to mature and make profitable and use some operating expertise to take to the next level. But outside of these large platforms, the opportunities for private equity have been limited because again, it's hard to find cybersecurity companies that are growing, that are profitable, have great metrics. So I think the way that private equity has now started looking at securities, look, this is something that's very investable. We just need to find the right approach, and the right approach is building platforms. We at Blair have a view that you could buy let's say a network security player and then add on some security operations tools on top of that, and maybe add some threat intel, or you could add some kind of SOC operational analytics on top of that. So there is a way to build a platform. Every platform that you build needs to have an M&A strategy. It's very rare that you find private equity getting excited about, hey, I'm buying this company, it's kind of cash flow break even, and I'm just going to run it down and make it profitable and make my return on it. It has to be the scale. And you're seeing this play out as we speak, right? Like think about Mimecast, right? Mimecast has made three different acquisitions in the last year or so, right? In order to expand their purview of outside of email security more into human security. You've seen Proofpoint do the same thing. You've seen some of the other PE-backed names come out to market and make these M&A acquisitions as well. So I think there's a play to be had where you buy a platform, you expand your TAM, and that's how you're going to get your return versus the old playbook where you buy a company, you really fix up the OpEx, you drive EBITDA, and then sell it to the next buyer or IPO. So it's a different playbook. It's a more thoughtful playbook, I would say.
Makes sense. Thank you. Now, within those private equity firms and other investors looking at the space, do you see more vertical specific interest like healthcare, financial services, or is it more focused on general purpose platforms?
That is one thing that's evolving, right? And I use this example that we saw when SaaS companies came out initially, right? You had your Salesforce, your Workdays, your ServiceNows that had very horizontal platforms within SaaS, right? But not industry specific. But then we saw the evolution of something like a Viva that sits on top of Salesforce that just does CRM for healthcare, right? We saw companies like Procore that do sort of the management of everything that relates to construction, right? Built on top of like a ServiceNow, those workflows, right? So we saw that happening in the SaaS world, and I think we're starting to see that happen in cybersecurity as well. Especially if you think about a great example, this company's been around for a while. If you think about Imprivata, they only do identity for healthcare. They're the dominant leader in that space, and they have the maximum market share for what they do, single sign-on for healthcare. If you go to your doctor's office, more than likely you'll see an Imprivata little tool over there, right? You're starting to see that, but it hasn't fully evolved yet, right? And I think the reason is a lot of these companies, again, the last security is very new, right? New in terms of software, it's maybe like 10 years old. So I think you're starting to see these different verticals start to form, especially in highly regulated spaces like financial services, healthcare, government, etc. So there's an evolution, but it's not there yet. We're just starting to see that.
Perfect. Thank you, Pratik. That was super helpful. Now, as we wrap up the session, one final question. I'm sure our audience is very interested in learning what advice you would give to founders of cybersecurity startups who are planning to raise capital or the founders who are planning an exit strategy right now in this environment?
Yeah, look, I think there's it's look, to be honest, it's not easy, right? The environment's very different than it was 2 or 3 years ago. However, I think the successful exits or the successful capital raises highly depend on your product differentiation, and more than that, the story that you're able to tell. And the reason I say that is cybersecurity is very complex, right? It's you can go to seven different websites or companies, and you cannot differentiate what one company does from another, right? It is a problem that investors have. It's a problem that buyers of those security, like product buyers of those security companies have. So my advice would be, if you are not able to explain what your company does within, 2 minutes to a cybersecurity expert, to a CISO, or whoever it is, you've lost the plot. Be able to explain the problem and why you are the right person to solve the problem. That's very much from a product perspective, right? The other thing I would say is focus on your go-to-market. Understand who your buyers are. There's been a shift in the market where a lot of the successful company raises that we've seen in the last, let's say 12 months have come from companies that serve the mid-market and the SMB market. The reason you think about that is, there's 500 Fortune 500 companies, and there's a massive TAM post that, right? What are you really serving? What problems are you trying to solve? If you are trying to simplify security, that's the right go-to-market motion you should think about. Um, and then folks who are trying to exit, I think, look, the challenge is there's only a few really true security buyers, right? You can think about all of them: Palo Alto, SentinelOne, Zscaler, Cisco, Tenable, Checkpoint, CrowdStrike. So, the 7 or 8 different, public companies that have done deals in the past that are very active in the space. I think that when you're thinking about an exit, really understand the partnerships that you have. If you have built a partnership with a specific company, whether it's large, small, medium, whatever it is, understand what your customers are looking for and how you and that other company can work together. That's how a lot of these deals are getting done. It's not by looking at a market map and saying this company is really good. If you are able to work with that specific buyer that's in your mind and build a partnership, do joint customers, the customers come back and recommend you and say, hey, this your company plus this bigger company works really well together. That's what you want to drive to. Partnerships become extremely critical when you think about an exit. And it's becoming more so because there's, seven different solutions that probably solve the same problem. So that would be my advice. So to really sum it up, if you're trying to raise capital, truly try to differentiate your story, make it simple, easy to understand your go-to-market. And if you're trying to exit and you have a particular buyer in mind, make sure you're really exploring the right partnerships with them, because that's how a lot of folks get excited, engaged, and when the request comes from a product team to the corp dev team and says, "Hey, XYZ company is great. We should have them under our umbrella." That's when you see real value for your company.
Thank you, Pratik. That was a great answer. Thank you so much for taking the
Yeah,
time
happy
today
to
to
do it.
talk to us. It was such a pleasure knowing the cybersecurity market and learning from your viewpoint. Super helpful. Thank you so much once again.
Yeah, anytime, happy to do it. And if your listeners have any further questions, feel free to post them, and we'll try our best to respond.
We'll
Appreciate
keep you
you.
posted.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.